Hello, everyone. Welcome to the AuthorHood podcast. Hope you're doing beautifully good. Writers live patience and resilience in their best orders, where a few work with deadlines, a few take their work as a deadline and give in everything they have. Our guest, Mr. William F. Carter, lives by the same. His debut book, Fascinate, has done beautiful among the readers in no time. So, how will you best introduce yourself to the listeners?
Um, let's see. My name is William F. Carter. Bill to my friends. I've been writing for all my life. I just turned 52 years old. I've been, and I did it just for fun as a kid. And then when I was in the seventh grade, when I was 12 years old, I
Okay.
received an award at the end of the year from my English teacher that said "Excellent Writer, Future Author," and that changed my life because I hadn't really taken it seriously to that point. It was just something that I did.
Huh.
And yeah, and so that put me on a trajectory, and that became the central focus of my creative existence. And so I started writing short stories and then graduated to writing novels in my late teens, 20s, and so on and so forth. Every piece I wrote, whether a short story or a full length novel, was a joy and a learning experience. So I continued to build on that. I wasn't able to go to college right out of high school. I wanted to, but my parents couldn't afford to pay for it, and I couldn't find a way to do it on my own.
Hmm.
So I worked for a while, and then finally, when I was 27 years old, I got a job at Harvard University, which is not far from where I live. And part of the reason for getting that job was to try and get my degree through their continuing ed program. So it took about 12 years, but I got my bachelor's and master's degree in literature and creative writing through the Harvard Extension program. And I learned quite a lot along the way and wrote a lot of good stuff and made a lot of good contacts and met a lot of great professors and classmates and came away from that a completely different person and a much better writer.
And hence an author.
Yeah, and hence an author, yes.
Yeah.
So I would not be a published author today if I hadn't gone through the
Hmm.
Harvard program, because one of my professors that I worked with became my mentor,
Okay.
and I started writing a novel in his class, and I only got like 6 chapters in, and by the end of the semester, but he took me aside and said, "Keep going with it, and when
Huh.
it's done, I'll show it to my publisher."
Wow. Now, when you have mentioned about the mentor thing, allow me to ask you how important it is to actually have a mentor when it's about writing and getting it published.
Yes, it counts for so much. Like because I knew I had some skill or some
Hmm.
talent, but it needs to be fostered if you haven't been in a professional setting.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I'd gotten good feedback from classmates and professors, but this guy took it to another level,
Hmm.
and he said when I submitted my first assignment, which was 3 sample chapters,
Hmm.
he said, "Okay, you've got what it takes," and he was ripping apart everybody else in the class up to that point.
Okay.
Yeah, he said because it's a long list of ingredients. Like
Hmm.
some people have a great story, but they don't know how to tell it.
How to tell it, yes.
Yeah, some people are fantastic writers, but they don't have a story to tell. And
Hmm.
so, yes, it was super important to my confidence and to my the longevity of my whatever career I might have. It was so important for someone to take me aside and just say, "Hey, you've got what it takes.
Yes.
I'm going to push you to the best you can be, and I'm going to be hard on you."
Hmm.
Yeah, and so I don't think I would have achieved that next level of my craft
Hmm.
without that guidance and encouragement.
Very well explained. Very, very well explained. So, a Harvard professional, I mean, that's a one big shot at life and already done with serving for 25 years. How graceful is that for you?
It's amazing. I worked plenty of jobs.
Hmm.
I worked at a bank. I worked at a healthcare company.
Hmm.
But it wasn't until I worked at Harvard that I really got a better sense of the world around me. I was
Hmm.
exposed to such a rich diversity of colleagues and students, and I learned so much because I grown up in the same area of Massachusetts my whole life, and it's fairly insulated, just your typical middle class suburban environment.
Hmm.
And um, there was so much more to the world that I hadn't really experienced, and I got to do that in this very thriving, very dynamic atmosphere at the university. And I met so many amazing people that
Yeah.
my journey and who I hope I inspired them in kind. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, it's been an amazing experience. I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world, and I hope to retire from there, and maybe in like 12 or 15 years. Yeah.
Oh, wow. So, being engaged with literature now for so long, is there any one area that you'd particularly want to bring improvement to that would help with the quality of literature in today's time?
Yes, that's an excellent question. And yes, when I was writing as a teenager,
Hmm.
I was I was really just kind of ripping off my influences. So I was a huge Stephen King fan. I grew
Okay.
up with his short stories and books. And
Hmm.
so I did try my hand at a couple of horror stories,
Hmm.
but they weren't great. And I realized it's a very difficult genre to write.
Hmm.
Um, of course, I was growing up, so there was a lot of teenage drama, a lot of coming of age stuff. So I
Huh.
wrote a lot of such stories that were thinly veiled episodes from my life. And then finally, my first novel that I wrote when I was 19 was
Hmm.
kind of a science fiction, fantasy, apocalyptic, epic story.
Okay.
And that was a big transformation. So anyway, I to answer your question, long story short, I've dabbled in a lot of different genres, but
Hmm.
it was when I finally decided to focus on crime fiction
Hmm.
in my late 20s, early 30s, and that has become my thing, and that is what I focus on. I mean, I bring in literary sensibility to that, and I want to make it the best it can be. So, but crime fiction is so riddled with cliche
Exactly.
and just crappy writing, like the typical like the airplane thrillers that they talk about, the stuff you can buy, like
Yeah.
the mass market paperbacks. They're
Hmm.
really just interested in telling a fast-paced story with twists and turns, and sometimes I think the quality of the writing suffers because it's like a factory to just churn out these one-note thrillers.
Hmm.
So that's been my mission, at least with my writing in the genre, to try to elevate it, and like
Huh.
I said, bring this a sort of literary quality to it.
Quality,
Um,
yes.
yeah. So where the characters, like the story, like they resonate. There's emotional depth to it. There's social commentary. Like even though this is categorized as a crime thriller, it's
Hmm.
really so much more. And the great thing is that the reviews I've been getting, the feedback I've been getting about it, people
Huh.
do sense that, and they say this is not just your typical thriller. It's so much more. So I want to help elevate my genre into something more than just a bag of cliches.
Again, very well said. Why I particularly asked this question is because, just like you said, that the characters, they actually need to resonate. And not just resonate with the readers, but actually resonate with the plot itself. And now, every other crime thriller out in the market, the characters, they feel lost.
Hmm.
As in when
Yeah.
you yes as in when you head towards the end of the story, towards the end of the book, the characters, they seem to really lose their individualism.
Yes, that's an excellent observation. That's very insightful because it's true that character development gets sacrificed in the interest of a a riveting climactic, finale or something. It all becomes sacrificed for the sake of whatever plot twists that the writer had come up with. So yeah, I
Actually,
think you're very on target with that. Yes.
needs to be really
Mm.
intense.
Yes. Like I said, it has to have its twists and turns. It has to have its
Exactly.
explosive moments and plot revelations. But it can have so much more. And I
So much
feel
more,
like,
yes.
yeah, that they don't necessarily take that extra step necessarily.
True that.
Yeah.
Okay, so in one of your previous interviews, heard you saying that Fire and Red was being worked on for a long time, 7 years,
Yes.
if I'm not wrong,
Yes.
yes?
You are correct. Yes.
That's a long, long time to be patient with one write, I must say.
Yes.
How often did you find yourself deviating and what put you back on track?
So my mentor that I had mentioned, my professor, had connected me with an agent in 2017.
Okay.
And I had two recent novels that I had written that I felt like had at least some potential to go to market. So the
Okay.
agent said to me, he's like, okay, I'm willing to work with you.
Hmm.
What do you got? So I sent him these two novels, one of which became Fire and Wrath, and the other one was kind of a sci-fi horror story. I did dip my toes back in horror, and it was okay. But
Hmm.
this one was the better one. And so okay, let's work on this. So listen, so the novel was already written, but
Hmm.
it certainly had potential to be more. It wasn't. It was nowhere near what it is now. So it was just an endless cycle. So I would send him the manuscript in like a Word document,
Hmm.
and then he would go through line by line, and it was like a 300-page novel. He would go through line by line with track changes and just
Huh.
point out everything that I was doing wrong, and he would like comment on things or put in like
Hmm.
uh, do edits and stuff, and then just say, okay, go and fix all this. And sometimes he would give me specific guidance of what to do, and sometimes he wouldn't. He would just say, okay, you've just got to come up with something better. And I was like, yeah, okay.
Hmm.
So then I could spend like a month or 2 months or 3 months
Hmm.
working on that revision. And then I would send it back to him and say, hey, it's all perfect now. And he would be like, no, it's not. Then he would take my edits and then go back through it again. Sometimes he would take 3 months just to get back to me. Like I would send it to him in September and say, okay, here's everything you wanted me to do. What do you
Hmm.
think? And then he might not read it till December. And then he could take a while and then send it back to me. And then just that cycle just went on and on. We did, by my count, I would have to go and check, but I believe we did 25 rounds of revisions over
My
those 7 years.
goodness.
Yeah. And at first it was small stuff like, okay, I don't like this line of dialogue you did.
Hmm.
But then it became bigger picture stuff over time. It was like, okay, this subplot,
Hmm.
I don't think this is working, or like this twist you have here, you've got to come up with something better. So I would say the biggest breakthroughs that we made were just in the last year or two, when we really got it where it needed to,
Hmm.
and then just putting the finishing touches on it. So yeah, it was a very, very long process, and I learned quite a bit. So I would hope that my next project will not take as long. Um, and he admitted it. He's like, I know you've put your blood, sweat, and tears into this.
Hmm.
You put everything, and once again, I'm trying to push you to get it where I think it can go. And I'm like, I never resented that. And at one point, I was like, dude, I just want to come through for your sake. Never mind me. Like, I would love to get it published
Hmm.
just so you can get paid, because he hasn't been paid a single cent for all his time over the last 7 years, which is really, I mean, that's just the way agents do. They work on commission, and they don't get their commission until the book starts selling copies. So
Hmm.
he's put in, I can't even tell you how many hours into this, and I feel so bad because I just want him to be compensated for that. And I was so that when we got the contract and
Hmm.
we knew it was going to be published, I was almost more happier for him than I was for me.
Oh
So
wow.
but yeah, I mean, it was a very long process, and I got to tell you, there were times it felt they're almost hopeless. Like I just felt like I
Hmm.
was banging my head against a wall. I was never going to live up to his expectations or whatever. I wasn't good enough, and then luckily we got some pushes we needed. We had some other people look at it, some professional readers and editors, and they gave some really great feedback, and we built on that,
Hmm.
and that was what helped get us over the finish line. So it certainly absolutely does take a village to get all this done. It's not just the one writer
One
behind.
writer behind, yes.
Yeah, yeah, you need a lot of help.
A lot of help. So true.
Yeah.
Writers, they actually live patience. they're not just patient, they actually live patience. I mean,
Yes.
yes, if one needs to understand what actual patience and resilience is, one must sit with a writer.
Yes, I agree. It's insane. It takes such discipline and willpower and patience, and creativity. And like they say, it's 10% inspiration, but 90% perspiration.
Perspiration, yes, so, so true. So rightly said.
You got to have a good idea, and you got to have a good concept, and you got to have a lot of skill, but it's also just being willing to put in those hours, even knowing that it may never see print, or if it does see print, like maybe it won't even sell. Like now that it's out there, it's been published. Now I'm trying to work on the marketing end of it, and it's very difficult to get visibility for it. But yeah, it's a constant exercise in patience. Yes.
One wow answer again. So, fire, being one of the five elements of essentiality, has been put forth with a unique concept. An arsonist was actually mastered fire. How did the
Yes.
idea get into being?
That is a great question. So, without giving away too many details,
Huh.
I was a bit fascinated by fire when I was a kid,
Okay.
and maybe my friends and I
Huh.
possibly might have started a forest fire or two by accident.
Okay.
Nobody got hurt, and it eventually was we helped put it out.
Hmm.
I think it's almost a universal fascination. So I just always had this particular thing about fire that, I mean, it's so, like I said, so elemental and so really uncontrollable. Like it can get out of hand in a
Hmm.
split second. So, and I feel like there's an equal level of fear and fascination that most people might have with fire.
Hmm.
Like the idea that somebody has come far closer than anybody else to actually controlling it and mastering it, I thought was a great concept.
Hmm.
And the fact that he's not a bad guy. He's not an evil man. I
Hmm.
mean, he's been beaten down by life, and he's the victim of a lot of bad choices and bad circumstances, but
Hmm.
he has at least a relative moral compass. And the thing is, like, the few times that I've seen that arsonists are portrayed in the media, like in TV shows or movies,
Hmm.
they're always irredeemable, and they're usually like in some way mentally deficient or challenged.
Yes.
So I thought, what about a twist on that? How about an arsonist who's actually very intelligent,
Hmm.
who studied the craft and studied the science and knows more about it than most firefighters and is an expert? And where does that go? Like, what might happen with him? Like this, it's like an interesting concoction, or it's an interesting formula for, I think, really cool stories.
Amazing. Not just the idea, but actually knowledge of what exactly fire is and how it can be maybe put to use, I'd say.
Yes, yes.
Great. So, an arsonist and a sheriff, they have
Mm,
been made to serve each other for the benefit of their individual purposes in the book.
yes.
Was there friendship in the plot since the beginning, or you had to build it up later?
No, it definitely was part of the original concept, because I will say, like, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and I've seen pretty much all the different buddy cop movies there are. And one of
Hmm.
my favorites was one a very early example of the genre, which was called 48 Hours with Eddie Murphy and Nick Nolte. It came out, I believe, in 1982, and it was a cop
Hmm.
working with a criminal to track down this psycho guy who's killing indiscriminately. And just I love that idea
Hmm.
of two people on opposite sides of the law coming together for a common purpose and solving the mystery together,
Yes.
um, and winning the day. And they start off hating each other, but they become like unlikely allies by the end of it. And I love that journey, that
Hmm.
transformation. And I think that was always in the back of my head. In fact, I think in the first draft of the book,
Huh.
they were given 48 hours to solve the case as a total tribute
Uh,
to that movie. And then my agent looked at that and was like, get rid of that. There's no way they could do this. And nobody's going to tell them to do it in 2 days. And I was like, okay, fine. So their friendship and their banter and their their
Mhm.
differences, the tension between them
Huh.
is almost its own character throughout the story. And I didn't know how well I did with that, but I will say with all the reviews on Amazon, which I have like 28 now, which is a good start.
It actually is.
Yeah, and I got a bunch on Goodreads too, and almost everybody
Amazing.
mentioned, yeah,
Huh.
it mentions their core, their friendship is like the heart of the story. And I am so grateful that it did come through in to that level, like that everybody appreciated this unlikely pair of guys,
Hmm.
old friends, but yeah, trying to solve this case together.
Great.
Yes, and that's been mentioned too, like in the reviews, that this story challenges the traditional ideas of right and wrong,
Huh.
and ideas of justice and revenge, because that's it has a very heavy central plot to it, um, and it questions traditional roles of good and evil,
Hmm.
and I still believe with my as messed up as this world can be,
Hmm.
I still believe I have a very idealistic mindset that I think most people are inherently good and they want to do the right thing, but sometimes just life gets in the way of that. And so I I, I don't like painting labels on people
Hmm.
or characters as just he's good and he's evil.
Hmm.
Like I think everybody has their own demons and everybody has their own wants and needs. And I feel like most people want to do the right thing in the end. I want to believe that anyway.
Just like the saying is that it's never black and white, it's always
Mm.
gray.
Yes, yes. So I definitely bring some moral ambiguity to,
Hmm.
like, just the idea of a sheriff recruiting a criminal to help him with this case. I mean, I think most police officials might frown on that. So, but yeah, but it gets the job done. So was he right or was he wrong to do that?
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Yeah,
It's for the readers to come up with whether it was
yeah,
right or whether it was wrong.
yes, yep. It's up to them. Yep, they're the ultimate decision makers in the end about everything. Yeah.
Actually. Okay. So Jack Coyle and Vance Miller put justice to the universal concept that each being under the sun meets the other for some purpose.
Hmm.
The big picture we are unaware of. What is your fair say?
Um, yeah, I think every character in my world
Hmm.
is on some sort of mission or is on some sort of journey,
Hmm.
and yes, and the people they intersect with on the way, I feel like there are no coincidences necessarily for
Hmm.
the big things, and so yes, maybe it's call it fate or destiny,
Huh.
but yes, I feel like it was their fate to be drawn together after being childhood friends and then not seeing each other for 25, 30 years and then
Hmm.
drawn together for this greater purpose. Yeah, that was not an accident in the universe of my writing.
Amazing. So now, wrath, that is another extreme emotion. What is the main idea behind the title, and what did you, as the author of the book, wanted to explain with it?
That's a great question. So that was not the original title.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so the original title was called Dead Man Zone, which is an Australian firefighting term. It's like
Okay.
something about the area that will be combustible in like a wildfire.
Hmm.
Like it's almost like the zone of danger. Like once a wildfire gets going in like the forest or whatever, the dead man zone is pretty much where it's the worst place in the world to be. But I knew that I was never quite satisfied with that, but that was the working title for a while. And so once the book had come a good ways in its progress,
Hmm.
my agent and I sat down for so many side conversations along the way for a million different things. But one of them was, all right, I don't like this title. We got to come up with something better.
Something better.
And I must have thrown dozens of suggestions at him,
Huh.
flowery titles or more like arson or firefighting terms.
Hmm.
Like one of the titles I floated was Point of Origin, which is like when an arson investigator they try to find where a fire began.
Hmm.
but I feel like none of it was quite there. It wasn't the perfect title. So without any spoilers, like I said, the underarching, whatever, the underlying theme of this story is it is one like very long-term vendetta, or it's a vendetta that's been like that has its roots in something that happened 30 plus years before. And it all comes together for the reader near the end of the story. It all becomes clear. So it's a revenge story, and our heroes are there to try to stop this before it can go further. So if you could say the two key elements of the story, it's about fire and it's about revenge. From the point of view of the person taking revenge, the suspect, whether the culprit, feels righteous in his actions. So you could say he's guilty of the sin of wrath, of righteous anger. So I didn't come up with the title, my agent did, and I'm so jealous because I wish I came up with it.
Oh God.
Yeah, we were on a phone call, and he's like, "How about this? How about fire and wrath? Like, just that's boil it down to its absolute basics." And I said, "That's perfect. Yep, let's go with that." And we never looked back. We never second guessed it. And I'm so glad. I love the title. I think it's perfect. Yes.
Bringing meaning to the plot.
Yes. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, readers, they read with their own interest, bringing to life various different perspectives at the end of their read. That's one general, very general statement. What is that one particular takeaway you, as the writer, want for all the readers to consider in common?
I definitely want them to picture the characters as they see fit in their own culture.
Okay.
So the book is written from the first person point of view. So it's it's from Jack's point of view. So it's I did this, I did that. And I don't really describe him other than that he's tall and thin with kind of lank hair. I don't say what race he is. It never comes up if he's religious or not, or any. I don't even really mention what town he came from. It's Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, but I realized after reading it that I never actually say it's Philadelphia, and that's fine. So each character, I just give them a couple of aspects that I describe. Like Vance Miller, like I mentioned that he's stocky with a broken nose, and that's it. I don't say hair color. I don't say skin tone. I want the reader to fill in the blanks for me with these different characters, and in a way that's going to resonate with them. So I try to have as like blank a canvas as possible for the characters, but the setting is based on a real place where I grew up in Plymouth, Massachusetts. Like the geography is real, and I try to describe and like immerse the reader in a well-defined setting. So the main characters of this are all in like their 40s or 50s, which is my age group. And so I certainly have my share of regrets, and I've made more than my share of mistakes. And so one of the ongoing themes of the story is being haunted by the past and having regrets and feeling guilty about things you've done. And of course, most of us have not committed the crimes that some of the characters have. But I think there's a universal sense of trying to redeem oneself for past mistakes.
Past mistakes, yes.
That's a big theme in the story. I'm glad that a lot of readers have picked up on that this is a redemptive story for several characters. So I feel like we're all only human. Nobody's perfect. We've all made mistakes. So I try to make these characters human and relatable in the sense that they have their regrets. And I think it's a powerful thing for the reader to be able to connect to without judgment.
Like you said, that there's no shape and figure to the characters. I guess after reading the book, every other sheriff that the reader would see on the streets is Vance Miller, and every other arsonist is Jack Coyle.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're leaders in their industries, yes.
Yes. So, how would you describe the publishing of your book? Now, when you have talked about the mentor, you have talked about editing, you have talked about what all it took. Now, talking about the publishing part, how was it for you?
It was frustrating for a while. So we did send it out to, I think the first round was like 20 or 30 publishers, big and small.
Hmm.
My agent has been in the industry for like 30 plus years, and he used to be an editor at one of the big publishing houses in New York.
Hmm.
And he just lit out on his own um, to be an agent not that long ago, and not long before he and I started collaborating.
Hmm.
And I hope that his reputation, which is stellar from what I understand,
Hmm.
might open some doors for us or give us some consideration. But unfortunately, most all the big publishing houses shot us down and just passed on it. Sometimes they gave reasons, sometimes they didn't.
Hmm.
Then I found and the internet is wonderful, so I found another list, a website
Hmm.
that had a list of like 36 publishers that specialized in crime fiction.
Hmm.
And there were most, like a few of the ones we had already contacted, but most of them we hadn't. So then that was in January of this year, so now almost a year ago. And so we sent stuff out, we queried them, and I will say that I think most of them never even got back to us. They didn't even
Hmm.
reply. So I was almost ready to go the self-publishing
Hmm.
route, which I did not want to do because I knew very little about it.
Hmm.
But then Austin Macaulay, a publisher in New York, are growing. They've only been around for like 20 years. Um, they're a big publishing house.
Hmm.
They publish like 50 or 60 books a month.
Hmm.
Like I said, and we worked so long, 7 years on this
Hmm.
story, and then and now we were ready to share it with the world and bow before our literary greatness, and then nobody cared.
Hmm.
So it was a little disheartening,
Hmm.
and I was so like downfall and just like I was so like just sad that like nobody thought this was worth taking a chance on. So yeah, I was starting to look into self-publishing. I mean, I know it's come a long way
Hmm.
in a short time, and it's certainly more legitimate than it used to, and people can write bestsellers that and self-publish and do great with that. But I wanted to go through a publishing house. It was my dream since I was a kid.
Hmm.
So yeah, so luckily, like I said, Austin Macaulay did pick us up on it and offered us a contract. And so the thing about them is that they are a new model.
Hmm.
They're different than most other traditional publishers. So there's no advance. Like I said, like most publishers would say, okay, here's $10,000
Hmm.
and you'll get like 10% royalties
Hmm.
on anything you sell after a certain point. And from my research that I've done, and I've done a lot of research in the last year,
Mhm.
believe me, is that most first-time authors do not earn out their advance. So the idea is that, okay, so we're giving you $10,000,
Hmm.
and the amounts used to be a lot higher, but they've brought everything down, certainly after COVID. And so the idea was, okay, we're advancing you this money based on future sales,
Hmm.
and then most writers don't sell $10,000 worth of books.
Yes.
So then they don't get any royalties because they never earned out their advance. So that's the traditional route. And you pretty much have to be like the next genius. You have to have the next Twilight or Harry Potter. Really, you have to have something so good and just market gold to really get out there as a first time writer. And I mean, there are a lot of talented writers in the world, but not everybody has that $1 million concept or that bestseller just waiting to happen. So Austin Macaulay is a bit different. So there's no advance. They do give royalties immediately, and the percentage is much higher. I believe I get 25% on all paperback sales, and I get like 50% on ebook sales. But given the ebook's only $4.50, that's not a lot. But from every book that is sold from the day this premiered, I will get a royalty on every sale. So I won't get my first royalty check until April of next year. So I honestly have no idea how many books have sold, but my Amazon sales rank has kind of gone up and down. So I feel like it's doing okay, but I won't know for a while. So yeah, but but I will say I didn't know what to expect with Austin because, like I said, I'd never been in this position. And I will say their production team, it was phenomenal. So they took the manuscript, and
Hmm.
as I said, I signed the contract in March,
Okay.
and the book was on the market in July. So the
Hmm.
entire turnaround time was 4 months. And I'll tell you, that went by really quickly. So their production team was great. They proofread and edited the manuscript, and then they sent it to me. They sent it back to me to approve it and to review it. And I did catch a few mistakes that I
Hmm.
hadn't caught before, so that's good. And then they were very collaborative with the cover. And to be perfectly honest, I really didn't have an idea of what I wanted on the cover.
Hmm.
You would think I would after all this time, but I didn't. I kind of was hoping they would come up with something really cool.
Hmm.
Um, so they just said point blank, so what do you want on the cover? And I was like, I don't know. Let me think about that. And
Huh.
so my agent and I, once again, we had like a day long, like on a Sunday, we were on the phone for hours, and he made me cull through just like a million different covers on Amazon. Like I did a Google image search for a
Hmm.
thriller with fire themed cover, and they all started blurring together after a while, and they were all very similar, kind of a painting, but maybe sort of computer generated, and they were all very generic after a while. And
Hmm.
so I said to him, well, I had different ideas of what to do. And once again, just like with the title,
Hmm.
my agent boiled it down to the absolute basics and said,
Hmm.
okay, what is the story about? Really, what is it about? It's about an investigation into a
Hmm.
series of arsons. So the central image of this story, would it not be a house on fire? And I'm like,
Yes.
that's a really good point.
Hmm.
Um, he is very smart. This is how he makes his living. And so I just said to them, okay. And I just wrote it. There was this big, like 10-page questionnaire I had to fill out. And the cover image was just one of many questions. And
Hmm.
so I said, okay, an ominous image of a house on fire, preferably at night. And I just wanted to see where they would go with that.
Hmm.
And so they came back with, okay, this is what we have. What do you think? And
Hmm.
I loved it. It was so different than anything I expected. It was really cool, almost like so effective in its simplicity,
Hmm.
um, that it was just perfect. And but the funny thing was that the font for the title
Huh.
was in this very curly, almost like Harry Potter font,
Okay. Huh.
like that would be on a horror or a fantasy book. And we look and my agent and I were like, no, this is bad. And I think one thing I will say out there, my advice to first time writers, if you ever get in the position that I've recently been in, is that do not be afraid to push back on your publisher. Doesn't matter if you're a first time author and
Hmm.
nobody knows your name, it's your book. Like that's going to be your legacy, your product. And
Oh,
so,
yes.
so do not be afraid to push back on them if you
Hmm.
don't like the packaging that they're coming up with. So, listen, I will say my agent hated the cover, but it was
Okay.
my decision in the end, and I'm like, no, I love it, and my decision stood. So that's the cover, and I have no regrets about that. But I did ask them to change the font into something just more blocky and stark,
Hmm.
and they did, and so the second try was perfect, brown, almost pretty much
Huh.
black, and then the letters, the title is huge, and the letters are actually like white but
Huh.
filled with fire. They're like fire, so it's almost like the letters, or they're blocky, but the letters are on fire. So I thought that was a really cool little detail. Yeah, we wanted everything to click. um like the font and the title should match
Huh.
the starkness of the image, because it's a fairly dark story.
Hmm.
um like there are a lot of themes that we're dealing with, but in the end, if it's not a completely happy ending, it's a fair ending, and overall, like, more positive than negative. But it has some very bleak moments and some fairly dark and graphic themes to it. So we definitely wanted something to match the seriousness of
Hmm.
the story. So, like, I think, yeah, just in all aspects, the font, the title, the image, like, I feel like it all clicks. And obviously, they sent that to me before it went to press, And
Hmm.
so I saw the image on Facebook, and I have like 900 friends. They're not all real friends, but I have a lot of, I know a lot of people.
Huh.
Um, and so I put the image on there, and it wasn't just, I wasn't looking for attention,
Hmm.
or I wasn't looking for praise. I said specifically in the text, I said,
Huh.
what do you think of this? Do you like this? Does it work? Like,
Huh.
if you saw this on a book, on a newsstand or on a
Hmm.
bookshelf, would you pick this up? Like, does it work? And
Hmm.
overall, the like 90 something percent of the feedback I got was positive. Like, yes, I that looks great. Like, even my brother, who is big into arts, like he's been a Photoshop guy forever. He designs stuff all the time, and
Okay.
he wasn't quite happy with it. But
Huh.
I talked him around as far as, because he hasn't read it yet. He's reading it now. But I just tried to describe that, like, it was so different and so cool and so offbeat,
Hmm.
but at the same time, sort of it matches the graveness of the story.
Of the story. Yes.
After all this time, I trust my instincts. They're usually correct, not always, but
Huh.
um, I felt good about it. And if I don't feel good about it, I'm
Huh.
not going to share it. Same thing with the story. Like, I have to like it.
So
Yeah,
yes. So yes.
yeah.
Also, sir, now when we are talking about the publishing thing, and you yourself
Mm,
mentioned about the self-publishing thing, so you have all the pros and cons with you
mm,
from the self-publishing and from the traditional publishing as well. The biggest drawback when you go for the self-publishing thing is that you don't have any mentor, any editor, any proofreader. There's
correct.
absolutely no one. And again, when
Unless
you
you
are
hire somebody. Yeah.
yes, mostly what happens is that people just don't go about it. They're like, okay, I have written it, I know what I have written, and it's just perfect. Let's just publish it. S-
Yes.
that's the
Yes.
reason why the quality goes down.
I wholeheartedly agree. Yes. I mean, it depends on what genre you're writing.
Hmm.
Um, that was one of the first things my agent told me in 2017. He's like, "Oh, and by the way, the fiction market is terrible." And I was like, "Oh, well,
Yes.
that's a good note to start off on." Yeah. So the fiction market is cutthroat. It's absolutely just murder out there. Um, it's so hard to get ahead, and that's the thing. Like I said, like, for a first time author in
Hmm.
years past, a publisher might be more open-minded and say,
Hmm.
yeah, we'll give you a $50,000 advance. We think this is okay. And because there used to be a more patience and a larger attention span
Hmm.
on the part of the audience or the readers. Same way with, you can say, with TV shows too. It's just like a show like Seinfeld
Hmm.
struggled in its first couple of years back in the 90s, and it really didn't hit its groove until like the third or fourth season.
Hmm.
And you couldn't even imagine that happening today. Like, if a TV show doesn't do well in like the first three episodes,
Hmm.
there's no way, it's like there's a very slim chance it's even going to last the entire season. Same thing with books.
They just bring it down.
Yes, much less patience, and there's the publishers are so much more conservative and
Hmm.
scared to take a chance that, like I said, like, unless you have like $1 million idea right out of
Yes.
the gate,
Hmm.
they're probably not even going to consider it, or they might not even give it a second thought.
True.
So, but I will say to writers, like, there's nothing stopping you from trying, and, like, give it your all. If you believe in yourself, you believe in your craft
Hmm.
and your product, absolutely go for it. Like, you've got nothing to lose. And is there going to be a rejection?
Hmm.
Absolutely. I was rejected by 30 publishers. Does
Hmm.
that really bother me? Does that bother me now? No, not at all.
Not at all. Yes.
It makes me appreciate the victories. And like I said, I got my foot in the door, and my book is out there. Now it's on the part of the market to see
Hmm.
if it will rise or fall. And so I believe in what I do, and I believe in what I have. So I think it's good if just I need to give it more visibility. Like, if people give it a chance, I think they'll like it. So I would say to aspiring writers,
Hmm.
absolutely go for it. But like I said, but once again, be prepared to put in the time. Like, if you
Yes.
don't have an editor,
Hmm.
like, and that's the thing too, I will say, and this is a really hard lesson for me, is that while publishers do have in-house editors,
Hmm.
they're also not as patient as they used to be, or they're not willing to put in the time.
Hmm.
So from what I've heard from multiple agents and writers, is that they kind of expect your book to be in shape
Perfect shape and order, yes.
They expect it to be in marketable shape
Hmm.
as soon as they get it. Like, so that's why the agent is now, your typical literary agent is wearing many hats, and an editor is one of them. See, agents typically work with the writer,
Hmm.
like just say my agent worked with me to
Hmm.
get it into the shape it needs to be. So if you are, let's say if you don't have an agent, like I said, try to find a good editor. They're out there, and some will work for surprisingly reasonable fees. Like get an editor, get a proofreader, get, like I said, get your beta readers, like send it to people, like get their feedback, and
Hmm.
work and be prepared to act on that feedback. Like it's all constructive criticism. They're not trying to rip you apart, they're trying to help you.
Help you, yes.
But yeah, there's so much I feel like the writer needs to do before they even think about querying a publisher or
Hmm.
even an agent. Like try to get in as good a shape it can possibly be. And I have no ego when it comes to my writing. All that matters is what's the best for the story. It's
Hmm.
like I've had to excise an entire subplot from my novel that was like 50 pages,
Hmm.
and I cut it without a second thought because it served the story better to get rid of it. So it's just you got to be prepared to do the work and be open minded and be open to constructive criticism. And shoot for the moon. Like go for the publishers because you might just have that $1 million idea. Like somebody's got to have one. It might, like I might not be one of them, but somebody out there might have just the next big thing and they don't know it, and they won't know until they try to market it. So I would absolutely encourage you to go for it, but just have thick skin and be prepared for rejection. But don't let that be discouraging.
Now, take my admirations, please. You had the idea, and the idea is right there in the hands of the readers already.
Yes.
Okay. So, one last question.
Mm-hmm.
What is that one bonus statement that would go from William F. Carter to the listeners, the readers, and also the writers?
I would just say, yeah, be open minded and read with not just with your eyes or your mind, but with your heart. And the best stories are the ones that resonate with us, that move us, that inspire us, and leave us different than when we read it. The ones that make us better people or stronger people. Just there's kindness out there in the world. There's goodness, um, and it sometimes comes in the most unexpected packages with the most unexpected protagonists.
Actually, it does. Also, is there anything in the pipeline?
Oh yes, I'm working on the sequel to this. It picks
Okay.
up like a week after Fire and Wrath ends, and it will resolve one of the existing problems in his life that this story doesn't tackle, but the next story will. It's hard to explain without spoilers, but just it's a direct continuation of his life and his drama. I'm about 50 pages into it. I'm happy with it so far. We'll see what happens with it, but I'd like to maybe have this a first draft done by, I don't know, like sometime in the spring or the summer. We'll see. And I have other ideas. I have a million ideas of other books I want to write. It just depends if I have the time or the opportunity to make that happen.
Waiting on Jack Coyle again, and best
Yep.
wishes for all the ideas that you already have with you, and waiting to see you published again.
All right. Thank you so much for having me. This has been wonderful.
This actually was wonderful. Thank you very much for accepting my invite and being so patient all through. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.